Just wrapped up a day of filming out here in SoCal, and we are joined by the one and only Fenton from the Zygrene channel.
What's up, guys?
We're going to talk about the cars we reviewed over the last 2 days. We're doing this new series, these post-review discussions that a lot of you guys seem to enjoy. And why don't we start with the Maserati? Just because that's the car that we've been driving this weekend.
Eye-opening experience. I'm really glad that we got to have this for the last couple days. I had no expectations. All I had read about this car online was that, I mean, it's fast, pictures of it look beautiful, that's about it. But when I drove it, I was like, God damn. So
dude, why am I so confused? Oh, here it is. I was wondering where the side view adjustment was. There we go. It is incredibly capable. I was concerned it might just be one of those like beautiful cars that, you know,
like the Gran Turismo we had.
Yeah, and then, you know, you also hear that, oh, it has this twin turbocharged V6. You're like, okay, that's not what I was hoping for. Stuff like that. But driving it, I found that it was incredibly dynamic, very sharp front end, great turn-in, great steering. Engine has a shit ton of power. This thing is actually traction limited. But what do you think of the engine?
It's definitely the weak part of the car, not from a power output standpoint, and I would argue I'm even good with the power delivery, because, you know, it revs to 8,000, there is a lot of turbo lag down low, but it builds power towards the red line in a very exciting supercar-like way. It's just the sound that kills me. Like right now, go partial throttle, listen to that gravelly, just, oh, it's unpleasant.
Yeah, puttering around town is definitely suboptimal, and then even when you're pushing it, it has this turbo front and center, which I think would fit a different kind of character vehicle, but not a car like this. You want this car to, okay, you can't do naturally aspirated, I get it, emissions, new laws, you know, it's 2024, but at least don't put the turbo front and center. Try to get it to sound, I mean, even McLaren and such are doing their turbocharged engines in a way where it doesn't have this gravelly sound, it doesn't have the whooshes, you know, right in your face.
I'm going to say something maybe a bit controversial. I think because of where emissions laws are going and downsizing and turbocharging is, you know, losing cylinders is the way now, I actually would not mind a little bit of artificial sound as long as it's done well. I would prefer a little bit more of fake induction sound compared to what this sounds like.
Dude, even driving this slow in GT mode, the softer mode, it's like, it drives really well. The front end, even in this mode, in the softer suspension adaptive damper setting, it's planted, it's dialed, it's responsive.
I think in GT mode on the street it works well. When I started pushing it in GT mode, very wallowy.
Oh, interesting. I was driving it more in Corsa, actually. Not even
in Corsa, it felt so dialed.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
The transmission was kind of weird. You know how you're saying like the transmission's not smooth? In GT mode, it's perfectly smooth.
Oh, it's
only when you dial it up to sport, it gets a little bit more violent, and then in Corsa, it's just every upshift and downshift it just
a more character change, make you feel more drama. The thing I didn't like though is that if I'm braking hard into a corner and downshifting, it can sometimes upset the car a little bit.
Yeah. I wish you could separate out the transmission setting from
like a custom individual mode.
Right.
Yeah, that'd be dope. But I guess to summarize the car, it's $260K. Would you buy one if you had
starting price?
Starting before options, right? Would you buy this if you were in the market for a car of that value?
I think it's the most beautiful car, sub 400K. Don't think I'd buy one. I'd go GT3 RS, but that's because I love NA.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there's also something about the interior that, you know, I get it. The Italians do interiors a lot differently than the Germans, especially Porsche. And yeah, essentially I would go Porsche too.
Look at this, man, the bezels.
Massive bezels, the screen looks like it's like 10 years old. I mean, this, you know, the black levels here aren't great. The interior itself, like the touch points, it reminds me more of like my Emira rather than a supercar.
Right.
And the Emira is a $100,000 British sports car, not the best build quality. Even here, like the center cubby here on my Emira has some issues closing, and same thing here. The amount of force to open and close it and the lack of crispness just, it would bother me if I dropped that much on a car.
I agree with that.
All right, so Let's talk about the highlights from yesterday and today. I think we reviewed 16 cars.
And I don't even remember what we drove yesterday.
What were some of the highlights? I'll say my number one car from yesterday.
Oh, I know what you're gonna say.
The Evo 6.
Oh, I forgot we drove that yesterday.
Dude, the Evo 6 and the M2. So
yeah, M2.
Let's start with the Evo 6.
Well, it was a potentially once in a lifetime experience. Like Evo 6, already such a rare car. Not a whole lot have been imported yet, at least. And the way PJ, the owner, set this one up, just dialed. Roll-in suspension with a higher spring rate, all of the track-focused mods, the AP Racing 6-pot front brakes. The only weakness I thought the car had was the engine. I felt like it could have used another 1,500 horsepower, but the chassis was amazing.
Yeah, the chassis was absolutely excellent, and even every input in that car was congruent and more in the direction of motorsport rather than, you know, when you look at an Evo, at least when I look at an Evo, I'm not expecting a CAE shifter that's super hard and like heavy steering that has, you know, incredible feedback and a sharp front end and being super planted. It was set up in such a way that you had a lot of confidence. You could push that thing hard and enjoy it a ton. I felt the power was like, because it's all-wheel drive, he at least dialed out a lot of the understeer that these cars tend to have stock. And dude, how do I turn the air up here? Like I keep putting this lower.
Press the comfort.
I need some more fan speed and cooking.
There we go.
Thank you.
You're a peasant. You don't know how to operate a supercar.
Supercars are just too fancy for me. I very much enjoyed the car, and the power, I can see why you're saying. How much more power would you want?
I would want like up to 100 more horsepower.
The chassis could definitely handle that.
Because he said it was like 380 at the wheels. It did not feel like that to me. It felt like maybe 300 at most to the wheels.
Yeah. The way he set it up, the chassis can absolutely handle more, another 100 for sure.
So you got it to sub 3,000 or sub 2,800 pounds.
Yeah,
that's
with all the
P1 S2000 weight.
All the mods he's done to lighten it up, because it normally is what, 3,100 stock?
3,000, 3,100, yeah.
Yeah, it was my favorite experience, the most memorable drive from this weekend for me,
by far,
by a large margin.
The M2 was good too.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so base M2 F87. I've only driven 2 stock examples before. Was never impressed by that car. I thought the handling was too loose, the suspension, non-adaptive dampers, and it was just very squirrely all over the place, not confidence inspiring, snappy at the limit, and the engine, the N55, without a tune, just in stock form, makes good power, but there's no character to it. There's no build. The sound is kind of just muted throughout the rev range. Was not my favorite car.
I would actually go as far to say as the stock M2 was a big disappointment for me because it's held in such high regard.
Right.
M2 Comp, different story, but a stock M2 definitely underwhelming for most people.
Yeah. I would totally agree with that. But the way the owner set up this one, MCS 2A suspension, non-remote reservoirs, SPL front catalog. He had some aero on it as well and some brakes. But mostly it was the suspension and the SPL bits with the spherical bushings. It just made the front end of that car feel so sharp, and the way it handled bumps was just incredible.
Thank you. Great etiquette today. I was shocked. I mean, the suspension mods, I think, completely transformed the car. The front end felt so sharp. If I recall correctly, didn't it have quite good steering as well?
The steering was good, but he had like an aftermarket, small diameter, very thin steering wheel, and that also enhanced it further.
Yeah, with the suspension mods alignment plus that, I was like, holy shit, I never realized that BMW steering can actually be quite feelsome rather than numb. It was, he did some engine mods too. How much more power was he making? Do you remember?
He said something like close to 400 at the wheels. I still didn't love the engine character, but I mean, yes, it's a very effective engine. You can make big power with an N55, but if you recall, like soon after we hopped into an M2 Competition, totally stock with just an exhaust, I far prefer that engine.
With a proper M engine, the S55 rather than the N55.
Yeah. With a 7,600 RPM redline, it's just a lot more exciting.
Yeah, and then the power delivery too, a little bit more linear as you get towards redline,
right?
Versus just like flat torque.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, the M2 Comp. That was a car that stock form is a huge step up versus the M2. But the way that I felt is that, well, we were comparing it against the E90, right? E92.
Yeah.
And you look at older BMWs, they tend to be a bit more analog, a bit more connected. And you go more recent, current M3s as an example, very digital. And the M2 Comp is actually straddling that line, I feel, where it's giving you a much more connected feel than like a modern G87 as an example.
Yeah.
And I think the comparison makes a lot of sense because M3s have gotten larger, so the M2 is actually similar in size and weight to the E92. But while it is a big step up from a regular M2, a really big step up, I guess maybe I hyped it up quite a bit in my head. I was hearing how the M2 Comp is so much better than the M2 that I still just find myself preferring either older M2s and M3s or cars that are heavily modified like that M2 that we drove.
Yeah, I mean, end of the day, a stock M2 Comp is still a stock car, right? It's going to be a little bit floaty. It needs to be compliant for daily driving, which is how most people drive it. It's a fairly practical car. But I think, yeah, you summed it up well. Like, compared to a stock F87 base M2, it's a big step up. Not only in the engine, but also the chassis feels, I would say, significantly better, more planted. But then you compare it against any well-modified, like E92, E46, or that very well-modified base M2, there's still a big difference. But I think it's a much better platform to start with if you're going to mod your car, because the engine's already at such a high level.
Yeah, engine's already more special. I guess what I'm saying there, though, is for newer BMWs, I either need a modified example, or for an older, like a stock. We've driven some clean stock E46 that drove incredibly well, and I'd be super happy even stock. So I think because you're removing a lot of that connection, maybe they're doing that in the name of NVH and comfort, I don't know, trying to go more luxury. But a lot of these more recent BMW products, they just don't have that level of connectedness, and then you have to modify it, or you can just go old.
Yeah.
And that older one is already going to feel a little bit more analog, a little bit more connected.
I think it comes down to use case, and the reason I would still consider an M2 Comp is because it is refined. So much more refined than pretty much any like prior gen M3.
Yeah, that's fair. Especially if you're going to be doing daily duty with that thing.
Right.
What other cars, anything else from yesterday?
Yesterday I thought the E92 M3 was really good as well.
Yeah.
Excellent chassis mounted shifter. He had the carbon intake.
Dude, did the chassis mounted shifter feel like it was tilting away from you almost? There were times when I was going into like third and I'm like, wait, am I going to third or fifth right now?
Maybe a little bit,
it felt really far away, and normally I'm able to just put my hand like this and quickly touch from steering wheel to shifter, and here I was like, I could barely even make it happen.
Just the ergonomics of that car was really weird. The same thing happens with E46s that I've driven, where like the seat, even with a stock seat rail, is like kind of canted to the left, I think, and the steering wheel slightly over to the right. So I just feel like I'm kind of like driving like this, and then the shifter kind of makes it weird too. Very unnatural.
Dude, you noticed that in the E36 today as well?
I didn't notice it today, no.
The pedals, the brake pedal is not in the middle. It is to the left of the steering wheel. And the actual seat is also rotated left slightly.
That was the same thing with the E92.
Yeah, I think the reason they do that is because they just don't have enough room for the engine transmission tunnel over there, and you have to shift all the pedals over.
Interesting.
I think that's why they do it, but I'm not sure.
I think it's more noticeable when you have an aftermarket bucket seat. Because
yeah.
you don't have as much leeway to kind of just get your body in whatever position feels natural.
Yeah, it's holding you tighter and more in a fixed position.
But I think that those were the highlights for me yesterday.
Yeah, we did 10 cars yesterday. I think that's good for highlights there. What about today? We did 6 cars today. Well, let's start with the first comparison. We did a 997.1 GT3 against a 997.2 GT3 that was modified with a 4.2 liter engine. It was both bored and stroked out. And that thing, I mean, we had some issues. The owner in the morning, the engine went into limp mode. And he turned it off, turned it on, reset it, and things were fine. But then you drove it before me and went back into limp mode. Yeah. But then eventually over the course of the day, we finagled it a bit, and we learned you have to like roll into the throttle and all that stuff. And eventually you were able to drive it properly.
Yeah.
which we were trying to figure out because me and the owner actually drove it without issue, right? And then
so frustrating.
And you
Both
drove it.
times
And
I drove it.
Both you drove it twice.
Or
You actually
I
drove it
drove it 3 times.
3 times. But yeah, but the first 2 times it still went into limp mode, and we're like, "What's going on?" I was like, "Oh yeah, just short shifted. Like I'm shifting at 77 rather than
I shifted
8,000."
at 7 and then it did it again.
And the one thing I said was like, you know what? The only other thing I can think of is that I'm not stopping on the throttle. I'm rolling into it. So then we tried that and it worked. But it's such a weird quirk. But that's gonna happen if you have this custom engine build and tune, and that's just part of the downside.
Right.
What are your thoughts between those 2 cars? That was a really cool experience.
It was really eye-opening. Really eye-opening. I thought after driving the .1, which just had Öhlins, DFE, and what else did it have? I think that was about it. Oh, the RS 4.0 light clutch and flywheel.
Right.
That's it. Phenomenal car. Like really good compliance, not too stiff, not too soft. Good steering feel. Although it was on PS4S, so could have been better, but still 997 GT3 steering is excellent.
I was disappointed by the steering, and I think it was alignment and wheels because the wheels PS4S are known to numb steering response, but then even the recentering force was weak, so I figured that was something to do with the caster not being high enough.
Could be, yeah.
And the steering actually disappointed me because out of all the 997 GT3s I've driven, that was actually the weakest steering by a good margin.
Sure. But after I drove that car, it was like, okay, benchmark is set. 997.1 GT3. Very good car, very few weaknesses. Then I hopped into the built 4.2 liter, and once I actually, finally figured out how to drive it without limp mode, I pushed it, and I was like, wow. The front end response of that car and the way the JRZ 3-way suspension with 991.2 GT3 RS spring rates, the way that soaked up bumps, if you use my hand as kind of like, picture like the car going over a bump mid-corner, with the Öhlins setup, it's kind of like that. With the JRZ 3-ways, it was like that.
Yeah, much quicker response,
much
right?
quicker response. It settles very quickly. The amplitude of the I feel like the suspension travel felt like it didn't have to travel as much.
Yep.
It was just perfectly damped. And then the extra power was great too.
It felt way more buttoned down, and I think that the issue I have when you put Öhlins on these GT3s, they always feel a little bit too soft and they feel a little bit incongruent with the rest of the vehicle. That's how I felt about the .1. Whereas the .2 with the JRZs, both of them are going to have a very heavy clutch, very heavy shifter, heavier steering as well, hydraulically assisted, but still tuned in a way where it's heavy. And the JRZ and the much more special engine there, the more motorsport sound, the additional power, everything felt like it was just dialed up, but also far more congruent. Which way am I going? Fuck.
But yeah, one thing I noticed about that built 4.2 liter though is the top end is insane, but in the mid-range, when you gun it feels like, is something broken? Is this even a built engine? Like, it doesn't feel that strong, but then it comes on cam and it just explodes.
Yeah, it encourages you to work more in the top range for that car. Yeah. Absolutely. How would you compare it to the other 997s that we drove on that road? The 4.0, the 3.8.
Oh my gosh. That's the question, isn't it? Like, because I think total cost of mods, if you were to buy that a stock 997.2 GT3 and then do all the mods that Walter did to his, you're looking at 250 to 300K, right? That is squarely in 997.2
3.8
RS 3.8 territory.
Yeah,
we're very close. And I actually talked about this in my video, but even though Walter's car has more advanced suspension and more power, there's just something about the RS, the way it looks, the fact that they only made, however many hundred. It just, I would still pick that car, even though I think dynamically Walter's car probably is a little bit better.
Yeah, the issue with the RS2 is that I can sometimes feel overly nervous on these canyon roads, whereas Walter's was far more planted and actually more confidence inspiring.
Suspension wise, yeah, you can't beat JRZ 3-ways.
But the engine in the engine in the RS had this more motorsport sound and character, and this more
the
metallic.
3.8 or the 4.0 or both?
The 4.0 more so than the
Yeah.
3.8, but even in the 3.8, you know, over here you're getting some of it, but it's not. It doesn't quite have the same level of character as both the 3.8
Which
and the
is
4.0.
interesting because they're all Metzger engines. I'm sure you could tune a custom Metzger build to sound like that.
Yeah, I'm curious what the differences are that change the sound of the engine as it builds through the revs.
Yeah, I'd be curious too. Want to move on to the next one?
I think that's it. Now, I'm thinking about what else there was today, but wasn't there just MC20?
Oh, that was about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're getting close anyway.
All right, guys. Let us know what you think with a comment down below. Much love, and I'll see you all in that next one.